In this video I will show you how to make the phantom blade. For the base of the phantom blade I will use a few washers and stack them together to make a cylinder. Later on I will use popsicle sticks for the limbs, so make sure the washers are about as high as a popsicle stick. Here you can see me stack 4 washers together, but later on I removed one. I roughen up the surface of the washers and then use some epoxy metal glue to stick them together. I took 2 more washers and filled the hole with some more glue. Make sure you have some wax paper underneath so it won't stick to your table or anything else. After the glue dries, you should have a nice compact cylinder. This cylinder will contain the mechanism for extracting the limbs. The limbs will partly move inside this cylinder, so you have to grind away pretty much half of it, and also some more from the inside to create space. While you're grinding, the glue will probably get loose, but that's okay, it's just to temporarily hold them in place. The washers which are filled with glue will close up the top and bottom of the cylinder. There's probably a blob sticking out, so you have to sand it down to make it nice and flush. Next I will make the limbs by sticking some popsicle sticks together. I also cut some metal rods. Those rods will go inside the limbs to make them stronger, and they will extend into the cylinder. I made a hole in each rod near the ends. I will insert bolts through those holes later on to create a hinge. Next it's time to assemble part of the mechanism. First get your cylinder wall and bottom part and drill 2 holes in the top. And then join them together with some nuts and bolts. Don't make them too tight, those nuts and bolts are just temporarily and you have to remove them a few times in this tutorial. Now pick a place where the limbs can go and move around freely. And then drill 2 more holes for 2 bolts that will act as the pivot points. After that, make a slot in each rod by drilling some holes next to each other between the pivot point and the end. A guide wire will go through those slots later on. Now get back to your cylinder and make a slot on each end of the wall. The guide wire will go through those slots as well. Now you can temporarily install the limbs with some nuts and bolts and test if everything works properly so far. Then I got some stripped copper wire and bend it in a V shape. This will be the guide wire, so bend it in this shape so it will follow the paths of the limbs. Next it's time for some springs. I extracted 2 springs from 2 Nice Day Glickem pens. Springs from other pens will work just as well. Then I slided the guide wire through the slots of the limbs and added the springs. Then it's time for a tricky part. I have to insert the limbs into the cylinder and install the guide wire into the slots of the cylinder walls. Now the best way is to take a part of the wall off and then lay the wire onto the remaining pieces and then screw the top piece back on. You can drill some holes in the top washer and place it on top of the assembly as well. Make sure the springs are resting against the wall and the guide wire is in there nice and tight so it won't shoot out. Do a quick test to make sure everything is working and then bend the guide wire around the assembly and then secure it by soldering the ends together. You can also use some metal glue if you want. Next I grinded off the excess length of the bolts. I actually made a little mistake here, because later on I have to replace the bolts in the wall with longer ones. Next I went back to the popsicle sticks and sanded off the ends so they are flat. Then I drilled a hole in each stick for the metal rods. After that I used my Dremel with a sanding wheel attachment to round off the corners and make the sticks more look like limbs. After that's done, they should look a bit like this. Now for some more decoration I used some Wonder Flex for the metal parts. Next I heated up a paper clip and pushed it through the Wonderflex to make holes for the string. After cutting and melting the Wonderflex pieces around the limbs, I covered up all wooden parts and spray painted the Wonderflex silver. Next I used some epoxy glue to glue the limbs on the metal rods. While that's drying, you can work on the second part of the phantom blade. I found a metal tube and rod, which will fit into each other. Hold the metal tube against your arm and measure out the length you like and cut it off. Then get the metal rod and saw off just a little piece of it. Now the tube will be attached to the limb assembly, and the metal rod will be attached to the limbs by using a string. So first I will make a bracket by folding a metal strip around the tube. Then I put the pieces in a vise and hammered the ends of the strip down to 90 degrees. I will use the bolts in the cylinder wall to secure the bracket onto the bottom of the assembly. So hold the bracket next to the bolts and eyeball out where the holes needs to be. And then drill those holes and clamp the tube onto the bottom. Part of the bracket sticks out, so I sand down the corners and then hammered them around the sides. Next I made a slot in the tube and in the metal cylinder that goes inside as well. Now attach a string to the limbs and check if your slot is wide enough. If not, make a few adjustments until it's right. Then I made a shark fin out of metal and glued it inside the cylinder. Next I made a frame with copper wire and paper clips and soldered it around the tube to make a locking mechanism. A piece of paper clip will lock the shark fin into place and the assembly is released by pushing the paper clip up. To attach a string to the assembly I drilled a small hole in the shark fin. Then I inserted a string and attached it to the limbs. I burned the ends to make a secure nut. Next I made another assembly that will catch the string and retract the limbs. Now the springs in the limb assembly are not quite strong enough to shoot a projectile. To give the phantom blade some more force I will insert springs in the metal tube behind the metal cylinder. If you want it to be decorative and harmless, you shouldn't insert those springs. To keep the springs inside I will drill a hole in the end and insert a bolt. Don't insert the springs and bolt yet. There's one more step to do before that. I cut a piece of leather that will go between the phantom blade and your arm. I cut some slots in it for belts and then painted everything dark brown. After that I placed the phantom blade on top and marked a spot where the hole on the end is. Then I punched a hole in the leather, inserted a bolt and washer and secured it with a nut. Then I inserted the springs in the end of the tube and pushed the bolt through the hole on the end to secure everything inside. I will use the bolts from the cylinder wall to secure the other end of the phantom blade to the leather. Next it's time to attach some strings to the mechanisms to operate the phantom blade with our hand. One string will go to my ring finger. This string let the phantom blade unfold. Now the other string goes to my thumb. I can shoot the phantom blade with that. I tied the strings to some rings just for convenience. Next I cut a piece of wooden dowel as our projectile and use a pencil sharpener to make a point on the end. Now after grinding and sanding, the moving parts might not move so smoothly anymore. So I inserted some sewing machine oil in all moving parts to make everything move smooth again. After that, the phantom blade is done. This was my phantom blade tutorial. Thanks for watching.